Okay, so I opened your file, and first thing we want to do is we want to revolve your profile to get a solid ring around, and then we're going to do a radial array on that sphere right there in the surface that you want it to. So the first thing we do to do the revolve is the first thing I had to do was I needed the center of the revolve and those arcs. So I took your original curves and I just placed a point at arc center on any of those, and that's the point right there. So that's going to give me the numbers. I do a measure entity on that. I click that point and I get these numbers right here. The x and the y coordinates is what I need. So let's get rid of that measure entity. So I got those numbers written down already, and let's turn the curves off. And now let's revolve this. So I'll start the revolve command, and the numbers will be in there because I just did it a second ago. I want to go with caps 360 degrees, and there's my coordinates, the x and the y coordinates. And we're revolving in the z as the pole, so you put a 1 in the pole there. And so all I have to do now is shift click my profile, and I create my solid revolve there. And so now there's my solid ring, and I'm going to separate everything out on layers, because as we start revolving things like that little sphere, the interface will get really heavy, and being able to turn them off fixes that heaviness. So there it's on the revolve, and I can get rid of it. So now what we want to do is we want to radial array that sphere around in place. So what I did was I just took from that center arc, I drew a line that went all the way out to the very center of that surface that we want to place that, and I placed your little sphere there. And then I measured the depth of that surface, and I created a copy of it. That's this one right here. That's this sphere right here will be halfway inside of that revolve surface. If you want to see, there it is. So it's sitting there. So I want to radial array that sphere around right there. So how do I do that? Well, a couple of guys showed you. You get the you start the rotate command, and you want to have the pick is the origin, and then this number right here is how you're going to figure out your spacing. And so right now we're just going to do one copy. We'll get to the top view here, and how do you figure it out without waiting to do a million every time? Well, if you're just doing arbitrary spacing, we can pick this one right here, and we're going to put 360 and divide it by, and let's start with 200 spheres, right? That would be a value of 180, right? So we'll say OK, and then now I need to pick the center of the revolve axis, which is that point. I picked that, and it made a copy. And then I can go back to the top view again, and I go, I want it to be closer. So you would put more spheres and more spheres until it was close. Now, if you knew the math, if you do the math, you could figure out that exact number to put for your radial array on that. I just looked at yours, and you had 87 spheres as to do a quarter of it. So 87 times 4 is 348. So what I'm going to put is 360 divided by 348, and that gives me that number right there. And then I'll change my number of spheres to 348. Now what I can do is select that sphere. Let's reselect. I say OK, and then I'm going to pick that point as the origin. And now it's going to be working on that revolve. And so what we're going to have to do is wait, because this will be a heavy calculation to make 348 little solid spheres all the way around in that array. And then again, I'll be separating those out also onto this layer so I can turn them off, because you'll see once the spheres pop in here, it takes about 45 seconds or so, or a minute. I forget what it took, but it wasn't instantaneous. And the interface will really start dragging down once all those little spheres are in there too. So I want to be able to turn them off and work, and then I'll show you one more thing you can do also, which is once your interface, if you're working with a really large heavy model, you can start turning off the polygon shading and just have polygon lines will help out. And also, you know, just turn everything into wireframe. Then you can jam around and get to the zoom and move to the point you want to move at. And, you know, you can actually select things even when you can't see it there with those polygon lines. But if you need to see the shading, just turn the shading on temporarily to allow you to select things. And that's the way to speed. That's one of the ways to speed up your interface. The other way is in your preferences here. I keep my shading and line values up very high because I like to try and see the best representation I can. But you can really crush those down and speed up your interface also with heavy models because it'll just mean that, you know, lines look, you know, curves look jaggedy and your spheres and things can look really rough looking, also curved surfaces and stuff. So anyway, we're still waiting. It's working. It's not I'm not just talking for my own health here. So when that pops in, then we'll cancel the command and then we'll boolean our radial array onto that. So that's a better way to, you know, that as long as you're doing a radial array, then it works. If you had like a spline curved object that you needed to follow, then you would have to do the one by one picking. You could make a spline curve and then divide it up into you know, 10 equal sections and then copy it there. So there, it just popped in. Let's cancel the command. We'll view everything. Now let's get all those spheres onto its own layer so we can speed things up a little bit. So there's a window selection I just clicked, and this is how long it takes just to select 348 spheres. There they go. I right clicked. We're waiting. Now that's another thing, is make sure when you're doing this kind of stuff, don't start clicking ahead of stuff, because that's how you'll crash any application, really, when you start getting clicks ahead. So when things get heavy, you got to give it enough time to work. Now we're back to our interface. Let's get our Revolve back. There's that. And so now what we want to do, so there's your solid. And the other thing about separating those on two different ones also is it's going to allow me to do my selection for the Boolean in a window select instead of doing one at a time. So let's we're ready to Boolean them together now, and I'm going to show my spheres, right? And then let me get, I'm going to go ahead and just get some of this other stuff off of here right now, just so I don't, it doesn't bother me when I go to show you stuff. And see, everything, every little single click is, just takes a long time. So, oh, no wonder. Waiting, just to select a point in the line, but that's because it has to read the whole gig there. There's that. Let's send that off to a different layer that we can turn off. Did I get the OK button? There. Okay. I'm just going to delete that one right now for the sake of deleting it. Okay. So there's our interface. Kind of heavy. Let's get our Revolve back. So now let's go ahead and get on. Enough of me talking. A Boolean add. So I can go ahead and get in and get that one selected first. But so there's my first pick for the object for the Boolean add. But now if I window select the whole thing, my object I just selected will be unselected. So I'm just going to hide it real quick. And now I can window select that for the second pick. Wait till they become selected. And just for the sake of continuity, it should work. I'm going to show that again. And now I'm going to just press the space bar for OK. And it'll go into calculating. And there, now it's calculating down here. And we just need to wait. And this is another operation that will just take a long enough time. And wait, 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 wait. So this is the waiting game. And so anyway, now I'll talk about toolpathing it. So the easiest thing, so just these, so many tiny little edges and surfaces start coming and it makes it heavy. It's going to be a heavy toolpath calculation. So one way to get around that, if you have a computer that can't handle the calculation, I just did one for a guy a couple of days ago that took 5.5 hours to complete. But then I had the toolpath. Once I had that, saved the file, and I could post the code anytime I wanted for that. But that doesn't work if you're like changing values in the feature and I wanted a slightly smaller tool or a different step over, then you're waiting another 5.5 hours. So those aren't really that's not optimal. You want to know the numbers, get the numbers right on something like a generic surface that's not this heavy first, and then do that kind of a calculation. But one way you can make this an easier calculation on your computer is to then use Bob Art. So I could go in and create a Bob Art surface, place that properly, and you create a Bob Art feature by what's it called, from solids and surfaces. And then you get your stock set up, and you would select this Boolean object we're about to have here. I think we got it now. Yes. So now it's Boolean. You could put little fillets on there if you want to make your model even heavier, but that's all one object. Now you would go to Bob Art, and you could do oh, and by the way, now that all those aren't individual tiny little spheres, they're just the top shell that's cut onto that. You see everything sped up too. But the toolpath would still be a heavy calculation. I mean, those are lots of small, tiny little edges that have to be calculated through, and small little curves and surfaces. So do a Bob Art surface, but it certainly won't have as good a resolution as an original NURB surface. So if you can calculate toolpath on that, good. If you can't, you can make a Bob Art surface out of it and calculate that, and be much better to go. Anyway, that's how to do that.